The Headless Junker. Long ago, a dangerous vagrant roamed the region between the Rhine and Ruhr rivers in North Rhine-Westphalia. No one knew where he had come from. He was utterly unkempt, wore old, filthy clothes, and had a sinister face. His character was equally depraved. He felt no empathy whatsoever for the suffering of others. Since the lesser nobility of that region bore the title Junker, the vagrant mockingly called himself the Junker of the Woods. One day, he lay in wait in a dense forest beside a narrow path. There he spotted a young woman walking alone along that path between the trees. She had visited her parents in a small village and was now returning home to her family. Unsuspectingly, she made her way through the silent forest, believing herself to be entirely alone. Half hidden among the bushes and gnarled trunks, however, the Junker of the Woods secretly watched her. An evil grin distorted his unwashed face. Then he slowly rose from his hiding place. Stooping, and almost soundlessly, he followed the young woman through the bushes, keeping himself concealed among the trees. She did not notice the dangerous stranger drawing closer with every step until he had finally caught up with her. Before the young woman could turn around or run away, the Junker of the Woods suddenly burst out of the bushes. He seized her from behind with his powerful arms and held her in a merciless grip. The young woman was terrified. In a panic, she screamed loudly for help, but her cries faded among the trees. No one else was nearby. Desperately, she tried to free herself from the unkempt man's grasp. She writhed, lashed out, and begged him to let her go, saying that she wanted to return to her family. But her pleas did not move the depraved vagrant. The Junker of the Woods twisted his filthy face into a wicked grin and gave a mocking laugh. Then he tightened his grip around the young woman's arms. Without mercy, he dragged her away from the narrow forest path and into the denser undergrowth. Her long dress brushed across the soil, branches, and leaves as she desperately resisted, far beyond the reach of any help. Some distance from the forest path, the Junker of the Woods violently threw the young woman to the ground. Although she struggled desperately and begged him to leave her alone, he held her down, brutally. Then the dreadful thing happened. The Junker of the Woods tore parts of the young woman's clothing from her body and began to rape her. She screamed in fear and pain. Tears ran down her face, and in a voice contorted with agony, she begged the Junker of the Woods to stop. But the cruel vagrant showed no mercy. Instead, he laughed and groaned repulsively while assaulting the poor woman. After a long time, he finally finished his criminal act. When the Junker of the Woods released his victim at last, he leapt hastily to his feet. Without looking back, he fled through the undergrowth and disappeared among the trees and bushes. The young woman was left alone. In shock, she lay on the forest floor, unable to stand or return home. Her entire body trembled, and she wept bitterly in utter despair. Meanwhile, a great deal of time passed. When the young woman failed to return home, her husband and young son anxiously set out to search for her. Together, they followed the long forest path she normally used. Again and again they called her name, but at first no one answered. Dusk was already settling over the forest, and their fear grew with every step. Suddenly they both stopped. Faint, bitter weeping came from deep within the woods. The man and the boy immediately left the path and ran toward the sound. Eventually they found the young woman lying on the forest floor. Weeping and trembling, she told them what had been done to her. Her husband knelt beside her, wrapped his arms protectively around her, and assured her that she was safe now. Her son also moved close to his mother and tried to comfort her. Together, they remained by her side until she had calmed down enough to stand. Then they slowly returned home together, arriving before darkness fell. But the horror did not end with this one deed. Many other women later fell victim to the cruel Junker of the Woods. Although numerous people searched for him, the wicked vagrant was never caught during his lifetime. Several years passed, and the feared Junker of the Woods had died only recently. One day, a young man was traveling along the forest roads of that region. He was very happy, for he had married not long before. As soon as he returned home, he wanted to start a family with his beloved wife and hoped they would have many wonderful children. Before that, however, he had an important task to complete. On behalf of a brewery, he was to deliver a cart carrying several barrels of beer to a distant inn. The journey was long, so he would be on the road for an entire day and part of the night. As the sun was already sinking behind the trees, his route took him past his parents' modest house. The young man wanted to pay them a brief visit, so he stopped and went inside. His father and mother were overjoyed to see their son again. They embraced him warmly, gave him bread, cheese, and a mug of something to drink, and listened to his stories. When they learned that he intended to continue his journey that very night, however, they both became uneasy. His mother in particular feared that a band of robbers might attack him on the lonely forest roads. She earnestly begged him to spend the night at his parents' house and deliver the beer barrels to the inn the following morning. His father also wanted his son to remain in the house overnight. The young man explained that this was impossible because the innkeeper expected the delivery before midnight. He tried to reassure his parents, telling them that he was perfectly capable of looking after himself. Surely nothing would happen to him, and it was not the first time he had traveled at night. At last, the young man said goodbye, embraced his worried parents one final time, and left their house. Outside, he climbed back onto his cart and continued through the forest while his father and mother watched him go with concern. Soon, the evening darkness swallowed him, and only the creaking of the wheels and the clatter of the horse's hooves could still be heard in the distance. Before long, the young man was driving his loaded cart along a forest road frequently used by the region's wagoners. It was normally a busy route, but most people traveled it only during the day. Now the road lay deserted and lonely between the dark trees. The moon stood above the forest, and its light allowed the young man to see well enough to find his way. Confidently holding the reins, he believed he would reach the inn before midnight without difficulty. Yet the deeper the cart traveled into the forest, the more uneasy the young man became. He looked over his shoulder with increasing frequency, or strained his eyes to search the bushes and the road ahead. He did not know why a sudden sense of dread had taken hold of him. After all, he had traveled at night several times before. Nevertheless, he clearly sensed that something was wrong. It felt as though some dangerous apparition might emerge from the darkness at any moment. Even the horse slowed down and snorted nervously. The young man gripped the reins more tightly. In the very next moment, he would realize to his horror that his instincts had not deceived him. Something uncanny began to stir on the forest road a short distance ahead. At first, the air merely shimmered, but then infernal flames suddenly shot from the ground. They spiraled upward, and their dark smoke formed an enormous, shadowy portal. A terrifying figure rode out of this gateway to hell, the Junker of the Woods. But there was no head upon his shoulders. After his death, God's judgment had overtaken him. Because he had never been caught for his numerous crimes during his lifetime, and had therefore escaped his just punishment by beheading, he was now condemned to wander those forests for all eternity as a headless ghost. Yet the depraved Junker had not changed his ways even in death. Filled with hatred and malice, he made a pact with the devil and entered his service. As his reward, he received a demonic black horse, whose eyes were nothing more than vast black hollows. Mounted on this infernal creature, the headless Junker rode out of the dark realm of demons and returned to the world of mortals. There he was to bring fear, suffering, and ruin to every person who encountered him at night. As soon as he entered the lonely forest road, he noticed the young man and his cart loaded with beer barrels. The young man was frozen with terror. His heart raced, and his hands trembled on the reins. For a moment, the headless Junker stared motionlessly in his direction. Then, without warning, he spurred his demonic horse and charged straight toward the young man and his cart, amid the thunder of hooves. In mortal terror, the young man struck his horse with the whip and urged it to flee. At the final moment, just before the headless Junker and his demonic horse could leap onto him and the cart, the young man's horse surged forward. The headless Junker's tremendous leap narrowly missed its target. For one brief moment, the young man believed he might escape. In his panic, however, he forgot that his cart was far slower than the headless Junker's horse. The Junker wheeled his infernal mount around with astonishing speed and gave chase. Within moments, the headless Junker had caught up with him. With a tremendous bound, he and his horse leapt onto the cart. Wheels and planks shattered with a deafening crash. The barrels broke apart and beer splashed across the forest road. The terrified draft horse tore itself free and fled into the darkness. The young man was hurled from the cart and struck the ground in terror. Directly above him stood the headless junker's black horse. The junker dismounted, seized the man, who was trembling in mortal fear, in a powerful grip, and lifted him into the air. Without mercy, the headless junker dragged him away from the forest road, ever deeper among the bushes and trees of the gloomy forest. The young man screamed in panic and tried to break free from the headless junker's grasp. He lashed out, braced his feet against the forest floor, and begged the headless junker to release him. But he could do nothing against the ghost's supernatural strength. Every attempt to tear himself free was futile, and every plea was useless. At last, the same dreadful act that the former vagrant had committed during his lifetime happened again. At a particular place in the forest, the headless junker violently threw the young man to the ground, held him down mercilessly, and tore parts of his clothing. Then the sinister figure began to rape the defenseless young man. His screams of fear and pain echoed through the night. Weeping, he cried out for help, but once again there was no one deep in the dark forest who could hear him. In a voice distorted by agony, he too begged the junker of the woods to stop, but the junker paid no attention to the poor young man's pleas. After a long time, the cruel ghost finally released his victim. The headless junker rose and returned to his waiting demonic horse. With a single movement, he swung himself into the saddle. Then he galloped away along the forest road. The thunderous pounding of the hooves grew fainter until it faded completely into the distance. The young man remained on the forest floor for a long time, unable to stand. He was in shock, his entire body was trembling, and he could not stop crying. Eventually, however, he gathered what little strength remained to him. With great difficulty, he rose, pulled together the torn remnants of his clothes, and searched for the forest road. Every step caused him pain, and he had to stop several times to keep himself from collapsing. Weeping, he continued on his way. He constantly looked around in fear. Behind every bush, he imagined he could see the headless junker, and every rustle in the undergrowth made him flinch in terror. Again and again, he feared he could hear the thunder of demonic hooves and that he would be attacked once more. But the evil spirit did not return. The journey through the forest at night seemed endless. He crossed his arms over his body in an attempt to protect himself as he trembled and tears ran down his face. He had reached the limits of his strength, yet he forced himself to continue. After a long and agonizing walk, he finally saw a familiar light among the trees. It came from the house where he lived with his wife. Relieved but still deeply shaken, he dragged himself toward the safety of the front door. When the young man finally entered the house, his wife was horrified by his condition. His clothes were torn, his body was trembling, and tears filled his eyes. Even so, he could not initially bring himself to tell her the whole truth. He was ashamed of what had been done to him, and feared that she might not believe him or might think him insane. He therefore claimed that a band of robbers had attacked him on the forest road. The robbers, he said, had stolen the cart and its beer barrels and had taken parts of his clothing. But his wife knew him too well. She sensed that he was concealing something far more terrible. Gently, she took his hands, spoke calmly to him, and assured him that she would believe him and would always remain by his side. At last, his resistance broke down. Weeping even more heavily, he told her about the headless figure, the demonic horse, and the cruel act in the forest. When his wife had heard everything, she threw her arms around her bitterly sobbing husband. She held him tightly, comforted him, and repeatedly assured him that he was home and safe now. She then gently helped him wash and remove the forest dirt from his body. Afterward, they lay down together in their marital bed. There, the young man's grief, fear, and pain erupted once more with full force. Sobbing, he buried his face against her breast. His wife held him close, stroked his hair, and tried to soothe his wounded soul with love and tenderness. She too began to cry because such suffering had befallen her beloved husband. They remained tightly embraced throughout the rest of the night. Yet no matter how much love and affection she gave him, she could no longer prevent the terrible fate that would soon overtake him. Over the following days, the young man grew weaker and weaker. This was because every person touched by the headless junker fell victim to his deadly curse. Within a few days, the victim would lose all vitality until death finally followed. Neither medicine nor prayer could break the curse. Thus, one night, the sorrowful but inevitable moment arrived. The young man lay powerless and barely responsive in the bed he shared with his wife. His desperate wife held him in her arms and begged him to stay with her. Yet no matter how hard she tried, there was nothing more she could do for him. Only moments before his death, the dying man saw one final, horrifying vision that no one else could perceive. Infernal flames appeared before the bed. Within them, the headless junker manifested once again, this time in the form of a demonic bride. With devilish eyes, she grinned at the young man, mocked him with laughter, and blew derisive kisses at him. In this way, the apparition taunted him over the cruel act that had been inflicted upon him in the forest. The young man's eyes widened in horror. One final time, he reared up and moved his arms and legs as though trying to leap from the bed and flee. His wife could not see the apparition and desperately tried to hold him and calm him. A moment later, however, the last of his life force left him. He sank back and died in the arms of his bitterly weeping wife. Sadly, he was not the only victim. Other men and women encountered the headless junker while traveling alone along the lonely roads at night. They too died a few days later. Shortly before their deaths, the headless junker appeared once more beside their beds, either as a demonic bride or a demonic bridegroom, always taking the form of the sex opposite to that of the victim. As the incidents became more frequent, the people of the region scarcely dared to leave their homes after nightfall. Travelers and wagoners preferred to wait until morning, and even courageous coachmen avoided the forest roads. No one wanted to fall victim to that dreadful violator, who was among the cruelest figures ever produced by the spirit world.